Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Perhaps. Thank you for being here. This episode is going to go pretty deep. We're going to talk about why the US and Israel are really going to war with Iran right now. We're going to give some important political context and some important religious context to give you a bigger picture of this whole thing. And then I want to talk about what an authentic religious life and spiritual practice must look like in the context of our country going to war and using Christianity to justify it. So I got a bunch of notes here because I want to be as clear as possible. And I titled this episode, "We Need an Anti-Imperialist Christianity." And when I say imperialism, what I mean by that is the basic definition of imperialism, when a country expands its power and control over another country, typically so that it can expand its own power and wealth. And if we want to have an honest conversation about imperialism, the United States has always been the bad guy in that conversation. That's one of the huge wake-up moments so many people have as they go through their own political evolution and even a religious evolution, as they start to see the ways that the United States has used their own faith and theology and doctrines to justify imperialism. And from the very beginning, the United States has been all about imperialism because it was formed as a project of British imperialism. And when the US gained independence, it wasn't just this airy-fairy, idealistic, utopic idea of we just want to be independent. We just love freedom so much. It was so that they can do their own imperialism and reap all the benefits without having to give anything to Britain. And from the beginning, they justified it with Christianity. That's how you get ideas like manifest destiny, which says that as we're expanding and taking over other lands and killing other people and stealing their resources, if we succeed, that's a sign that God is guiding our path. Really messed up stuff. And I talk quite a bit about this in my book, The God Who Riots. It's behind me if you're watching the video version. And I talk a lot about how this has always been within the history of Christianity, even way before the United States. And at the same time, there's also always been this other stream throughout Christian history of people who had a very different kind of faith, people who were the victims of imperialist violence. And that faith always looked very different. And that faith looked a lot more like Jesus's faith. And so that's a big theme in my first book. I also talk a bit about it in my next book coming out in June, You Don't Need a Calling. You could pre-order it now, but it's in that book, I touch more on the ways that we internalize the Western colonial way of viewing the world, of always needing to expand and grow. And if we're not expanding and growing, then there must be something wrong, or God must be against us or whatever. And so this runs deep into the cultural logic of our whole lives. And so the faith of Christians in other countries as victims of imperialist violence, including the US imperialist violence, their faith wasn't about a God who gives them the power to take over and win and gain and grow wealthy. Their faith was more of a source of comfort in the face of the violence that they were experiencing. And anything about God changing things, changing their life or changing the world, wouldn't be about winning and growing wealthier, but it would be about God helping liberate them from their imperialist enemies. Even you get a lot of theology about God defeating their imperialist enemies. And that goes all the way back to the Bible. Like all those psalms and prophecies about praying to God to free them from their enemies and to destroy their enemies, those were written by people who were the victims of violent empires, not by the people, the empires. And so the people who are Christians within an empire, reading the Bible and then adopting an evolution of Christian theology over thousands of years, have a really difficult time relating with this story written by victims of violence when they're in a country that benefits from being the agitators, being the oppressors, being the violent ones. And because of that, a lot of people don't have this wake-up moment where they realize, oh wait, are we the baddies? Like that classic British skit. I forget who those guys were, but yeah, are we the baddies? Hold on. And so with all that in mind, I want to bring it to today and talk, before we get into like how we can have a type of anti-imperialist Christianity today and what that kind of spiritual practice can look like today. I want to talk about what Christianity actually does look like today. Not so good when we're talking about popular mainstream institutional Christianity and how a lot of it is being used to justify attacking Iran right now. And so let's talk about what's happening in Iran. So US and Israel airstrikes have already started and have already killed an article from a couple days ago. Right? It's even more now, said more than 555 people. And that includes 180 kids at an Iranian girls' school, which is just horrifying. And already you got to be questioning, like, how is it possible that people could be using Jesus to justify this? This doesn't make any sense. It gets worse. Okay, so let's keep going. So first off, so many headlines that I've come across, I'm sure you've come across them, are just going on and on about Trump doesn't even know what he's doing. There's no plan. He doesn't even know why he's doing it. And then when you are reading the articles, you realize, oh yeah, Trump, first off, is very vague when he's talking about what we're doing over there. And when he's not being vague, he's more so just endlessly bragging about how much more powerful the US military is than Iran's military. Just bragging and bragging way more than actually explaining why we're there in the first place. And he keeps flip-flopping. Like back in January, Trump said that we need to liberate Iran from its theocratic, oppressive government who are executing their own citizens. And now the US military is killing those citizens. So it never actually makes sense. It's hard to pin down a real reason when so much of it is about, no, we're going in, we're attacking them. Operation Epic Fury. Oh my God. I saw this pathetic clip of Ben Shapiro on his podcast talking about how cool and fun that sounds. Operation Epic Fury. Trump is so good at coming up with these names. Ridiculous. But the reason that makes the most sense for why the US is actually attacking Iran is just because Israel wants them to. This war doesn't actually benefit the US in any way. And it will likely lead to, in the immediate effects, rising gas prices all over the world because Iran is the fourth largest oil producer and they've already threatened to cut that off. And so, but yeah, it's like there's an immediate disadvantage we could see, but there's no immediate or long-term advantages here. It's really just Israel's war. And this isn't new. Netanyahu has been begging the US to attack Iran for more than 30 years. And that's the other thing that's really important, is that we don't just make this a Trump thing. This is a direction that the US has been going in for a very long time before Trump, and Trump is just a part of it now. And back in 1992, Netanyahu told the Israeli parliament that Iran was just a few years away from developing nuclear bombs. And they didn't. Then, 2002, Netanyahu told a U.S. congressional committee that both Iraq and Iran were developing nuclear bombs. even though they weren't. And the US then went ahead and invaded Iraq, looking for weapons of mass destruction. And they didn't find any. No nuclear bombs or other weapons of mass destruction. And Trump used to criticize Bush for that. But he's totally flip-flopped on that too. And then in 2009, WikiLeaks exposed that Netanyahu was telling members of Congress, again, that Iran was just a few years away from developing nuclear bombs, so we have to act now. And they weren't. 2012, Netanyahu made a presentation to the UN to tell them that Iran was about to move into the final stage. He had a whole graph and everything. It's like a picture of a bomb, and it was like, we're here, we're right here at the top of the bomb, final stage. They're about to develop the nuclear bombs by next spring, or at most next summer. And they didn't. And now he's still saying the same thing. Iran could produce a nuclear bomb any minute from now. And still, they're not. It's always been a lie. And the truth is, Israel just wants to topple Iran because Iran is a threat to Israel's ongoing imperialist expansion. Iran has supported Hamas and Hezbollah against Israel. And ultimately, if we're going with the larger Zionist plan, Zionists claim that the land that God promised Israel in the Bible includes Iran. And so eventually, the Zionist plan is to expand into Iran too, where all of that would be Israel. But this Zionist plan of expansion intertwines with the Christian version of it, the Christian Zionist plan, which is all about ushering in the end times so that Jesus can come back. And part of that very modern view of the end times is the belief that Israel must first be fully restored, take over all the land that God had promised them. And then, also, by the way, let's make this clear. When they say for Israel to take over that whole land, it's just the modern state of Israel. When the Bible talks about Israel, they weren't talking about the modern state of Israel established in 1945 through the genocide of Palestinians. Not at all. But that's not how they'll tell the story. So they'll say that it has to take over that full land. And then that will lead to a war between Israel alongside Israel's allies and the rest of the major countries. And at the peak of that awful, massive, violent war, Jesus will come back to bring permanent and everlasting peace. That's the narrative. But the thing is, here's where it starts to contradict, because so far Jewish Zionists and Christian Zionists are aligned in this plan for expansion and war, but how it ends is a complete contradiction, because Christian Zionists believe that when Jesus comes back, he'll also destroy all non-Christians, including Jewish people, even the Jewish people in Israel. But despite this, Christian Zionists and Jewish Zionists work together and just tolerate each other. And I guess they just assume the next generation will figure that part out. I don't know. It's very, very strange. And there's this article from Jonathan Larson on Substack that's been going around this week called U.S. Troops Were Told Iran War is for Armageddon, Return of Jesus. Subtitle, Advocacy Group Reports Commanders Giving Similar Messages at More Than 30 Installations in Every Branch of the Military. So in the article, it says, from Saturday morning through Monday night, more than 110 similar complaints about commanders in every branch of the military had been logged by the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, MRFF. The complaints came from more than 40 different units spread across at least 30 military installations, the MRFF told me Monday night. And so this is from one of the emails that were sent as a complaint to the MRFF. from one of the officers who said, please keep me anonymous, because they want to avoid any sort of retaliation. And it reads, this morning, our commander opened up the combat readiness status briefing by urging us to not be afraid as to what is happening with our combat operations in Iran right now. He urged us to tell our troops that this was all part of God's divine plan. And he specifically referenced numerous citations out of the book of Revelation, referring to Armageddon and the imminent return of Jesus Christ. He said that, quote, President Trump has been anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran to cause Armageddon and mark his return to earth. He had a big grin on his face when he said all of this, which made his message seem even more crazy. Our commander would probably be described as a Christian First supporter. He has been this way for a very long time and makes it clear that he desires all of us under him to become like him as a Christian. But what he did this morning was so toxic and over the line that it shocked many of us in attendance at the ops readiness briefing. Besides myself, I'm reaching out to MRFF on behalf of 15 fellow troops. I know you asked me about the religious views of our group who has requested help from the MRFF. I can only tell you that I am Christian and at least 10 of the others are also Christians. One of the others is Jewish and one is Muslim. I don't know the religious or non-religious status for the other three at this time. I and my fellow troops know that it is completely wrong to have to suffer through what our commander said today. It's not just the separation of church and state, as we discussed, Mr. Weinstein. It's the fact that our commander feels as though he is fully supported and justified by the entire combat unit's name withheld chain of command to inflict his Armageddon views of our attack on Iran on those of us beneath him in the chain of command. I hope by sending this email to you that this will help expose these wrong actions which destroy morale and unit cohesion and are in violation of the oaths we swore to support the Constitution. And I wanted to add, make sure I added that last part too, because there's like a practical version for like why this is ridiculous. Like, you know, the whole separation of church and state, also like just forcing these people to not just adopt Christian views, but adopt a very specific branch of Christian views. And for it to be so normalized. And then you have all these soldiers that are like, this isn't what we signed up for. I mean, they signed up for some awful violence for sure, but tying it to Armageddon really, I imagine, makes them feel like sacrifices. Like, oh yeah, we're all going to go die. Not just for America, but for Jesus. And it's all in the Bible. Foretold. Exactly what we're going through right now. Like, of course, I imagine people freaking out when they're hearing this. And it's just ridiculous. Like, this is not what Revelation was talking about. And this is not what any Christians believed Revelation was talking about until the last 100 years. They started to develop this idea that Revelation was talking about some future war. And then in the last few decades, really making it about a Middle East war. Now, we could go through a huge rabbit hole about all the ways that Revelation has been interpreted throughout the last 2,000 years and the historical context of the symbolic language of what they could be referring to. Specifically, we go on and on about the Roman Empire and show how all these different symbols in Revelation were directly referencing the Roman Empire. We could also talk about prophecy and how to understand prophecy differently, and how it wasn't just a way of predicting the far out future. It was a way of symbolically talking about the present, but also prophecy is cyclical. So it also works as a way of saying this is the oppression we're experiencing under this present empire, but these symbolic truths are able to be held as meaningful in the different contexts by different people under a different empire in a different time as well. That's just the power of that kind of religious writing. Not instead of just this idea of like John of Patmos writing Revelation as a message to the United States 2,000 years later. Like that's, like I said, a very modern interpretation, but also just very ridiculous when you actually get into the historical scholarship around this. Also, Revelation famously was debated to even be put in the biblical canon in the first place. And so it's a very controversial book. The whole thing is just filled with these symbolic references, which make it confusing. But I think what I can say confidently is that Revelation is a book of hope to persecuted Christians in the present time, as John of Patmos is writing it, about the wars happening between empires in that present time, and promising those persecuted Christians that one day God would put an end to all of that and bring permanent, everlasting peace. And yet we have evangelical Christians today taking that message of hope to persecuted Christians facing violence and interpreting it as a message to Christians to start being violent, to start more wars between empires, and make the wars worse and worse and worse, so that God is forced to step in and come back. Like, I know it sounds completely ridiculous the way I just said it, but I feel like I'm not trying to straw man here. I'm just trying to be clear, more clear than the ways that these types of evangelical Christians would actually be as they go on and on and on about their beliefs about the end times. Like, it's like, if we're honest, it seems like that's what they're doing, and they're just completely misinterpreting the text. And I've always thought that people in government who would push the kind of Armageddon stuff, I always believe that they're basically just grifters. Even if they were like full-on Christians and always talked about being Christian, I believe they're just trying to trick evangelical leaders to support them. It's like there's this larger mission to just be an ally of Israel as a fellow imperialist power, and to expand Israel's power and also expand the United States' power as we continue to take over land and control oil all across the Middle East. And then perhaps someone along the lines was like, okay, yeah, and we could get votes on this mission if we get the evangelical voting bloc on our side by telling them that this is biblical prophecy. But it's hard to tell, like, where the grift begins and ends, and where the true believers begin and end. And it's hard to tell who is who, because you're making a judgment about what somebody is secretly thinking in their head. But nowadays, I feel like what happens in situations like this is that the true believers rise to the top because of their zealousness about the whole thing. And so even though there may be grifters and true believers intertwining on this, the true believers are going to end up doing more work for this mission and sacrificing their own morals because they really believe this is what God wants. They really believe this is what the Bible says. And so you can end up in a situation where something that was started by grifters a couple generations later is just led by a bunch of true believers who aren't fully aware that it was started by grifters. But I'm sure a lot of them are just grifters too. Like I said, there's not a way to really draw a clear distinction between who is a grifter and who's a true believer. And it's frustrating to even talk to certain evangelical ministers who believe this kind of stuff, because you ultimately have to bring them to the realization that they have been tricked. They've been used as a tool by these grifters. And so many people can't consider that, because they feel like that would just be so much wasted time and energy of their lives. And they don't want to feel like they've been lying to their congregation for years. So they can't even creak open that door. They can't. But at the same time, I have seen stories of different evangelical leaders who have actually started to think and read and research and come to different conclusions, and have come out and repented and said, yeah, this was wrong. This was really wrong. I can't believe I was a part of this. And so hopefully we see more of that, but we got to understand why it is so hard for so many people to make that shift. And I wanted to read this statement from Marco Rubio. He was justifying the attacks on Iran, saying it was for the safety and security of the world, and talking about how dangerous Iran is, and trying to convince people that we need to attack them before they attack us. Classic colonial justification, goes back thousands of years. But he criticized the Ayatollah, which are religious leaders, but they also have political authority in the Islamic Republic of Iran. But Rubio said the Ayatollah was a radical cleric. That entire regime is led by radical clerics who don't make geopolitical decisions. They make decisions on the basis of theology. Their view of theology, which is an apocalyptic one, that has to be taken very seriously as well. And it's funny reading that from Marco Rubio, because it's complete hypocrisy, especially when you consider, the theology of him and the people he's working for. Iran can say the same thing about Trump and the Christian leaders who support Trump, who were at the office praying for Trump, laying their hands on Trump, praying for him the other day. Iran could say the exact same thing about all of them. And so, complete hypocrisy. But here's another big hypocritical move that we're seeing, even from some progressives who are justifying attacking Iran right now. Because they try to justify the whole attacks, talking about how oppressive the theocratic regime of the Islamic Republic in Iran is, and talking about how they violently suppress protests, they execute their own citizens, and talking about how they have always oppressed women. But you can't really take that justification seriously, because you could say the same exact thing about the theocratic state of Saudi Arabia, which is a U.S. ally. And the U.S. government isn't talking about it being a problem in Saudi Arabia and needing to attack Saudi Arabia to liberate them from the exact same situation. And there was a similar hypocrisy when we went to war with Iraq. 15 of the 19 terrorists who attacked New York were from Saudi Arabia. And then Bush responded by attacking Iraq. But they were already looking for reasons to attack Iraq. So we're seeing the same kind of hypocrisy today. There's a lot of people who are a little bit older being like, you think we forgot that whole thing? Also, you think we forgot when Trump was criticizing that? Come on. And before we talk about what a different kind of Christianity can look like, I want to talk a bit more about the context of this world we're living in by talking about how AI is playing a role in this war. Because it exposes a direction that this war is going in, but also the direction that this whole country has been going in since before AI. And so let me explain. Anthropic is a big AI company. Their AI chatbot is called Claude. You may have heard of Claude. A bunch of ads lately. You may have seen the Super Bowl, a bunch of Super Bowl ads where people were it was like a person talking to another person, asking them a question, but the other person's answer was like robotic and nonsensical. And it was trying to say, this is what ChatGPT is like, but Claude is better. And so, yeah, that's Anthropic, which has a bunch of different AI systems. But Anthropic has been partnered with the Pentagon, the US military. And the military has been using Anthropic for all kinds of things. And so they were trying to create a new deal, and Anthropic wasn't going along with it. And so you may have seen some of the news over the last couple of weeks as Trump and Pete Hegseth has been heavily criticizing Anthropic and saying like, you're finished, you're fired, we're going to make you like totally like infamous. We're going to just destroy your company for not working with us. And part of it is they already were working with them, and the military is already using Anthropic's AI and so many of their programs. So it would be a huge hassle to change that. But I wanted to explain. They already used Anthropic's AI in Venezuela to find Maduro. They also used it in Ukraine for autonomous drones. These drones are able to go on autopilot using AI. They just tell it what to target, and then it creates its own flying route. And they have AI programs that are trained to process a bunch of tracking data and then produce targets, and then humans have to go through these targets to approve them. Really creepy dystopic stuff, I know. But the Anthropic CEO, Dario Amati, said that he's not comfortable with some of the way the direction this has been going. And two big things he's not comfortable with. One, his AI tools being used for domestic mass surveillance, meaning mass surveillance of United States citizens. And he's not comfortable with it being used for autonomous weapons. It's like he doesn't want them to use his AI tools to kill people in our country or in other countries. And I don't know how sincere that is. I really don't know his motivation behind trying to back away from that. Like maybe he watched Terminator too many times growing up and is like, I'm just trying my hardest to not end up like that. And any way we could slow down going that direction, I'll try. Or maybe it really is like a moral thing for him. Even though he's comfortable with all the other immoral things AI is doing, he just happens to draw the line right there. I don't know his motivation, but that Anthropic they tried to bully Anthropic to signing this deal and they backed out. And OpenAI, creator of ChatGPT, CEO Sam Altman, stepped in and was basically like, we'll play along, we'll do it. And so they started discussing a deal. The same deal that they offered Anthropic, and it's not all the way finalized yet, but once news broke of that, especially it being funny, they immediately just went to OpenAI. They got a lot of backlash, and then Sam Altman had to come out and say, I'm gonna add amendments, okay? Don't worry, people. We're going to add some amendments to make sure that our system won't be used to intentionally be for domestic surveillance on U.S. people. So we'll see what comes of that. But what I find interesting about that is you can have these AI companies that draw the moral line and say, no, we don't use us for that. But then you're just going to have another AI company come out. And you see that with all kinds of different types of tech companies. Some may try to be conscious, but there'll always be somebody else. Like that's just what capitalism is like. There will always be some other company willing to do the exploitation that other people aren't. Some other company that'll be willing to make things for cheaper, pay their employees even less, or ship work to other countries. Always some company that you can work with that will give you more profit, even if it means being extremely immoral. There'll always be somebody who says, oh, Here's our chance to come in. The other companies don't want to do it because they have moral lines. Awesome, we'll do it. There's our in. And it made me think, I think what a lot of people don't realize about new tech, like this has been true of all new tech, is that it doesn't stop and take us in a better direction. It just takes us in the direction we're already going even faster. And I say this with the memory of the late 90s and early 2000s when you had the Y2K futurism aesthetic, the Frutiger arrow aesthetic, where you had all this tech combined with nature, combined with ocean. And you saw that with like computer screensavers, but also the ways that tech was being shaped and ads and music videos. And there was this vision that tech would allow us all to step into this new utopia where we can all work less because tech can give us some rest. Tech can work on our behalf. And we could all chill and work less and rest and find meaning in other ways. And that's not what happened. Instead, what we got is that people ended up having to work even more, because when you have tech that provides more productivity, which then provides more profit, it's even more profit than that if you keep your workers working. So they just go with the option that gets them more profit. And so with AI, similar vision that some people have, like, oh yeah, AI is going to help us all work less because it's going to do work for us. But this time around, a lot less people were buying into that vision because we already went through it 20 years ago. We're like, no, that we know now that's not what happens with new tech. That it just keeps us working for more productivity to create more profit. And so AI in the hands of capitalists and imperialists just helps them keep going in the direction they're already going even faster. It just leads to more violence instead of the utopian hope we have that we'll finally stop expanding for more profit because we no longer have to. No, that's not the direction we're going. We're going in the direction of destroying the world for profit. So any new tech will just continue to hurl us in that direction. And so we need a new direction. Which brings me back to what I said in the beginning, that we need a different kind of religious life and spiritual practice in this context. And there's two versions of Christianity we commonly see within the context of American imperialism. One is what we've been talking about, the kind of Christianity that justifies the violence and praises it and prays for it and really just resembles more of a death cult than anything. The second common one we see is one that just ignores it all and isolates and spiritualizes the act of ignoring conflict. It's like, oh yeah, I don't care about war and politics and stuff going on in other people's lives. I'm just all about Jesus. Or I'm just all about my own spiritual journey, my own spiritual life, and just trying to keep myself grounded and centered. And so we need a different option than those two. And we need a spirituality that helps us connect with the rest of the world. Not just one that isolates us or keeps us going more and more inward, but actually helps us see that we're actually connected to every single human being in the world. And there's a common binary we see in spiritual talk between inward practice and outward practice, or internal and external. But we need a spirituality that dissolves those barriers between internal and external, inward and outward, between the individual and the collective. We need spiritual practices that help us see we are all connected. A lot of the ideas I have of I am this completely autonomous individual disconnected from the rest of the world, and it only matters what's going on inside and not with everyone else. Like, just breaking down the foundation of that false view of the world. That there is no true individual. There is no true independent being. We all share our being. We're all interdependent together. And so there's all types of different spiritual approaches to this over thousands and thousands of years from different traditions that talk about the illusion of separation, that talk about all of us being children of God is another way to talk about it. All of us being the beloved of God. All of us being one being. There isn't just all kinds of beings. Some traditions say we're all just one being, and thinking that we're all separate when we're not. There's all types of different ways to approach this. But I think that's the kind of spiritual revelation we need to have, and our practices need to help train us to see the world more and more and more in that way, whatever angle you come at it from. Instead of spiritual practices that are just about centering into myself, knowing myself, thinking about what's going on inside my soul or my body or my brain, or spiritual practices that help me see what's going on outward. How can I help people? How can I serve people? How can I love people? Instead, something that isn't about going either of those directions, but helps us go internal, see inward, but see how by looking inward, we are connected with the outward. We are, by going internal, realize there is no separation between internal and external. That's the direction our spiritual practices should be leading us. And when we have that kind of spirituality, then seeking justice and protesting war and fighting for liberation will feel like a natural extension of our faith. And I think when we can cultivate that kind of faith, then these other kinds of faiths, like the death cult, pro-war faith that just justifies violence and bigotry, and the faith that just is all about isolation and ignoring the problems of the world, when we cultivate this other kind of faith, then those kinds of faiths will become more and more repulsive. Like, I imagine it in a kind of similar way when you start eating healthy. Like, you're always eating like really unhealthy, super overly processed fast food, and then you start eating healthy, and your whole like palate and body changes. And then you eat fast food again, and it totally tastes disgusting, and your whole body repulses. It's like, oh my God, like what? How was I okay with this before? Like it's just a natural aversion now to unhealthy food. It's just like, oh my God, yeah, this is wrong. What am I doing? But you don't realize that until you start to eat differently, or until you start to live differently. And so that's what I'm hoping we can move toward, is to cultivate this other kind of faith, this other kind of spirituality, this other kind of religious life that helps us see how connected we are to everyone in the world, so that when things happen like war, we don't see it as a justification of how the world needs to go because of what the Bible says, or we don't see it as just like a disconnected thing way over there that has nothing to do with my life, but instead see it as like, oh, that's me over there. We're all interdependent. We're all one. We're all connected. We're all children of God. This is all like none of us are free until all of us are free. We are interdependent. And so that is the kind of faith that we need in this time of great violence. And so for those who got to this point of the episode, tell me, who's with me? I hope you are, because that's what we're going to keep talking about. Thank you for listening to this episode, and I'll see you next week. All right, bye-bye.